Hey, I'm Rachel Billingsley.
And I'm Luke Billingsley, and this is GMT Talk, our insider podcast where we talk about all things GMT.
Today on GMT Talk, we will be interviewing Ben Hull, Andrew Stead, and Colin Parsons.
Ben Hull is the designer of the Fields of Fire series.
Andrew Stead and Colin Parsons are the co-developers of Fields of Fire Deluxe Edition.
Most of you probably also know Gene, but for those of you who don't, he's a super fan of the Fields of Fire series and basically nothing else significant to know.
Okay, let's jump into the interview.
Thanks to Andrew and Colin. We have worked out all my frustrations. They've done just a bang-up job of coming on the team and really, all joking aside, I mean, they've really done a remarkable amount of work. So super grateful for their jumping on board and really, doing some really great work. So I'm super excited with what they've been able to accomplish in the last year and a half-ish, 2 years. I don't know. Seems like forever. I don't know. Was it? Time skews a little bit.
It's a lot of work. I mean, I see the work in it, guys. I do, and it's tremendous. I'm really impressed.
Okay. Yeah, it's been good. It's been
raises the bar pretty high, So now everything has to be that good.
I mean,
it's not bad.
I guess I have to like all the games that we do, and I do to varying degrees. But there are some games that just hit the bullseye for me, and Fields of Fire was always that game since the beginning, and so. But I knew that some people didn't get it, like especially people without any military background or any military adjacent background. They just had a lot of trouble with it. So to be able to be in a place where we can really take care of those guys while staying true to the core of what Ben wanted to do, I'm just over the moon happy about that. And you guys, the three of you, really have made that all happen. So thank you.
And I think speaking as someone who doesn't have a military background and really took to Fields of Fire, I knew there was a great game in there, and that some people were just not getting it for some reason. And so I figured we'd make it more approachable, try and get more people in, because everyone who plays it and works it out really loves it. So yeah, it's a great game.
And we proved in the playtest so far, we've had complete noobs come through on the volunteers, and we've got them up to speed. So yeah, it's possible we can get there.
No, really, and it's funny because once you've done a couple different games, some people just get it. When you delve into tactical games, it's like a different subpopulation of the game community, and so I think some people who brought something to it from other games often struggled to say, well, this is how this game does that, or this system does that. And it's not to criticize those systems. Those are fine. I used to play many of them myself. But, at the very base, I was trying to do something completely different. And so when you try to do something completely different, communicating that is a challenge. And so, sometimes I found just straight up noobs who hadn't played some other games, just got it because they didn't have any preconceived notions.
Yeah.
And so that helped a little bit. And so, if you came in playing a lot of hex encounter tactical games, that was, I seem to observe that as the biggest leap for some folks, is to kind of break that paradigm. But I felt like it just really needed something that would generate a good narrative, right? And then try to make it replicate the decisions that the people in the books and the movies, et cetera, had to make, and kind of bring in that, kind of the rest of the story. Because, we really don't sit there and count factors and how many hexes. We don't really know how far that is. It's about that far.
Yeah, I think to the vast majority of the people who are going to play this game, that they've not been in combat, or that they don't know what that experience actually is. And I think one of the beauties that you guys have created, especially with the idea to start with, Ben, is that you've taken a game that tells a great story, that immerses you in a great story, and it at least makes you feel like you think it is, even if you haven't experienced it. It gives you enough fidelity to real life that you go, oh, primary direction of fire. Oh wait, they're still firing. What do I do about that? Stop firing. I just really think it's cool that you've introduced something new to the hobby. Even though this game has been out for a while, it certainly doesn't have a peer in tactical games in terms of the new things that you brought to the table. But it also just immerses you in a great story, and those are my favorite kind of games. So kudos to you and to you guys who are making it even better.
Yeah, and I think the team did a great job about really kind of pulling the thread on the storytelling, because I think you can build a simulation, but I think the concept of and frankly, I kind of got the inspiration from video games. Sorry, because in a video game, you literally, like, you'll play Call of Duty and you're going through a campaign in Call of Duty. It's like, and then of course my own experience of being on campaign, where you're like, well, there's really more to it than it doesn't matter what my losses are. I got to capture the stone building in hex H23. You lose the context of, well, yeah, I have this to do, but I really have to plan, in the back of my head, I've got tomorrow and the next day, and how to kind of balance now versus what I think I might need tomorrow changes the dynamic. Doesn't stop you from just setting up a game and playing it. And so I think that's one of the nice things that the team did, is by doing like the starter kit, is like, if you want to just set a game up and play it, there's nothing wrong with that. You don't get the depth of it, but sometimes the player doesn't have the time for it, and I'm cool with that, right? It's you pay for the game and you get the enjoyment that you have the time and space for. We provide the opportunity, but I don't want to make it impossible to play if you don't have the time to invest right off the bat. So I think that's good to offer that option. And one of the other things I heard from somebody while I was, how do you make them different? And this is what that Colin Andrews put a lot of work into with the not just the deluxe version, but also as they're doing the work for Volume 3. How do I make Volume 1, 2, and 3 not feel the same?
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of careful work. Colin did some really good, like thinking through what missions, what things that I could do to make it feel different, so that you get a new experience from it. I thought that was some really good thought process that he put into. I think, Colin, you were saying, we'd gone down a path with like the Hellman thing, and then you got some new material, and then you're like, oh, well, maybe I need to take it down a slightly different path so that I get the fidelity and the newness.
Yeah. So we've been playtesting sort of Volume 3. We've done the Arnhem campaign and the Falcons campaign. We're about to start, hopefully soon. I don't know when this is going out, but soonish. The Afghanistan campaign, and some of the feedback we've had from the playtesters has been it feels very different, which is great. It feels different to commanding American companies and sections and squads. In the Falklands, I want people to feel cold and wet because it's horrible. And again, same in Helmand, I want people to feel dusty. And Andrew's going through the start. He's doing some pre-play testing for me at the moment, and I think you do get that feeling. It's good. So my military career, I joined just after the Falklands, and I left just before when Helmand set. And so those are my pet campaigns. I wasn't in Arnhem despite the age, but they feel good. And they feel like it should do. And just going back to Gene's point about the guys still firing in one direction when you don't want them to. I've been on both ends of that. I went through the ranks, so I was the private soldier who was still firing into the distance with people shouting at me, and I've also been the commander trying to stop them doing it. So, but it definitely happens, and that's the that's one of the great things about the system. It feels, again, I was an old hex and counter gamer. I've still got my advanced squad leader up in the cupboard from the first edition. But again, I don't know. And again, like Ben says, they're great games and I love them. But the whole thing of putting a massive stack of counters and looking up on the combat results table and saying, oh yeah, I don't actually need to throw the dice because I've just absolutely lumped them. It doesn't work like that. I know some of the sort of volume of fire stuff in Fields of Fire gets some confused questions until people really get it, but fire has a quality of its own, as it were, or whatever the quote was. But there's a point when it doesn't multiply, and so just having stuff going down works, and that it feels good.
Yeah, I think one of the statements I used a while back is you just can't shoot your way through a stone wall. I don't care how many rifles you get shooting at it, it's not going to go through. So eventually you're going to have to figure out something else. And so, no, I think there's also some stuff we're play testing, as we kind of expand out. So, I've done some initial work with, I'm kind of I hate to say fan, that sounds weird. I'm very interested in the French post-World War II. So, Indochina and Algeria. Read some good books, seen a few movies, etc. And so, I built out some initial stuff for that. And again, why does it feel different or worth doing? Well, their infantry formations were different, right? They had something that looked a lot like the Americans on paper, but over there, because of the challenges they faced, they reorganized their infantry units, which makes for an interesting story. And then, of course, everything's in French, which makes it sound fancier. But and then they rename everything. So once you think you know what a section is, well, it turns out in French a section is a platoon, and they don't call a platoon, even though it's a French word, because why would they? So they do have companies, but they number everything. So the Germans, the French, all the companies are numbered. So it's apparently it's just us and the British who like using letters. And so
we mixed up. You see, the Guards have numbered companies.
Oh my goodness! Well, because somebody had to pay for that. Well, that's a good point. But but that's an old American and British thing, except for Guards, which we don't have. You could say maybe it was the Marines. No, the Army would get upset because the 3rd Infantry calls themselves the Old Guard. But long story short, they feel different. Right. So, and then there were some tactical nuance. It was different. So, and then when I looked at the World War I stuff, there was a crossover. So, the French tactical doctrine had them doing a bayonet charge as the culmination of an assault. Right. So, Americans don't do that. We know how to, but that's not normal because you get shot. But the French still embrace that concept. And so you actually look at the tactical level, in Indochina and Algeria, they would get right up to the, fire maneuver, et cetera, up to the point, and then fix bayonets and charge. And so I had to okay, how do I incorporate that? And then that worked when I started playtesting some World War I stuff where that was a standard technique there as well. So I started working through some interesting rules. So we can do tidbits like in Bulge with the cellars. Right. So that was something that wasn't in any other games that came out in Bulge was, well, there's a cellar. It's like a super bunker, but you can't really shoot out of it. But boy, it's nice to be in it. And then that concept kind of fills a couple of roles. Oh, well, they have these kind of bunkers at Dien Bien Phu, and they have them in World War I. And so you start pulling this thread where, if we introduce this concept here, I've got several places where it kind of solves the game problem. And so that's, it's kind of exciting to see as the system progresses and we kind of tackle some, new situations. So when we went into Volume 2, I guess the first thing we had to tackle is, a kind of a preset map, so it's the ocean can't just be random, right? If I'm coming from the ocean, it's always right there. So we have, in the first one, it's very much the map's random, which I like. But sometimes it's a mix of, well, this part is random and this isn't. And then you get to Way City, where I have an aerial photo and maps. I know exactly where the buildings were. So the buildings are the buildings. And so I literally have the whole map laid out of this is the new city in cards. And I have the same thing out for Tarawa, where it's a small physical area. So the ocean's one side, we know where the piers were, and there's special cards for certain specific fortifications, and then you can have a set in the middle that's random. Well, that part, we normally know it's the fortified zone. So there's a random set of cards, but some of the periphery is well known. Because at the level of, literally a card is probably at its very minimum space there, because they were crammed into a very small space there, whereas Saipan, it suddenly opens up into something that's almost like Europe for part of it, or like Southeast Asia, it's spread out. And then you have tanks on both sides and massive amounts of artillery. And so it's a very large scale battle versus something very intimate like Tarawa, where it's face on face. And the Marines don't have a lot of toys. It's pretty early on. And they're, when I say toys, all those cool weapons that make fortifications easier to take down, they didn't have them yet. They didn't have bazookas yet. They didn't have as many engineers in the right place. So it was much more challenging, but in just a straight up, I need more rifle squads to do the work. So it's a very interesting feel with that one, but it's the same guys the whole time. So that lends itself to an expansion for Volume 2, where we do Tarawa, Saipan as a single campaign, because it was the same people that did it. 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines is who I'm looking at. And same commander for both campaigns, although he was badly wounded at Saipan. And some very colorful characters also that also give it kind of that really interesting historical story, just like the Arnhem campaign. Very interesting, colorful characters that, Major Digby.
Taking water with his umbrella and his bowler hat.
Yes, that is, it seems like it's a little odd to your average guy, but this guy was pretty amazing, because then, after the battle was over, he ended up escaping captivity, working with the underground, saving all these guys. It was like pretty amazing, in addition to actually fighting the battle. So that type of thing is really kind of interesting when we talk immersing the player. The details of that experience is so important to capture. But it's also challenging on the research side. So like the Tarawa thing, it's been researched heavily because the battle was very famous. It got a lot of books and study. I get over to Saipan, it was famous, but for different reasons. So a lot of the day-to-day struggle for the 18 days that they were fighting there kind of just gets hazed over. So it took a lot more research to kind of tease out the details for the game. And I still have to, probably before I finalize it, I probably have to run it over by the historical branch and see if I can get the special action report from 2.8 to kind of fill in the last couple of blanks I have. So if you can get those, they're great to have, because that's the actual log book, the battle log from the units that they submit during combat action.
So, Ben, that's a really good look that takes us maybe not all the way down in the weeds, but a good way down in the weeds to the different battles that we're talking about in the series. I kind of like to back off the view for a second, and just for the people that don't really know who are watching this, talk to us about your major design goals for the system. What do you want the player to feel and learn and do? And how has working with Colin and Andrew for this deluxe version, how has that furthered those goals?
So first with design goals, very simple. From day one, I wanted to create a system, because I always envisioned a system, because I try to, because I did that with other types of designs, is I create a system so that you can eventually have multiple games or multiple situations without having to learn a new set of rules for different things. Because personally, I find that a little annoying and just time consuming. There's nothing wrong with it. Some people are really into it, but writing rules is excruciatingly painful. And so thank God for the help from how to communicate vision is challenging in any sense, right? And then when you're doing something very different, so you're trying to communicate in familiar terms, but not with all the bag. It's so there are challenges in communicating something different. So I knew I wanted to go something different, and so one of the goals was, to make it essentially like a role-playing game. So the system is meant to be extensible from day one. I built it to be fairly generic. And so that's one of the rules challenges, is people would have a specific challenge at a time and place when the rules were really meant to be kind of overarching umbrella. And so it's like, how do I span that concept from overarching umbrella to this on this card at this time with this marker? What does this mean? Like, okay, let me get there. So that has been super valuable to help spell that out and fill in any gaps between the two levels, the actual gameplay of this particular mission and the concept of a rule system. And it being extensible, it was about decision making. So it's an economic engine of, I have things I want to do and I don't have enough time to do it. So that's the basic concept of I'm working against the clock, and I have a variable amount. So it's meant to be, I have a range, a probabilistic range of, I'm going to have between 3 and maybe 5 things I can do, but I don't know for sure. So that makes it, tension. I want to do 10 things, but I know I can only do 3 this time and maybe 4 next term, but I don't know for sure. So that adds a little bit of tension in there. And so that basic concept is, I want to do something, and so I have a cash exchange. I get a set of things, and that set of things should be less than 10, but more than 2. So it's in cognition, that's a decent number that you can handle and you can retain in your head without extra markers. Although we provide markers, and people are, why are there so many markers? I'm like, well, one of my basic fundamental things is I get interrupted. So I have to have enough markers to play it out on the map and come back, go, oh crap, I got to do this, or I got to go to work or whatever. And then come back and remember where I was. Now, can I play a whole turn without moving the markers? Sure. But then I'm going to put them in there to know where I left. So the team also did a pretty good job of, having played it and worked through it. It's like, hey, well, if we change this marker or do this, what we call the quality of life or QOL stuff, which is great. We did a little of that between volume, first edition and second edition, and then they've taken it to the next level with the third edition. Say, hey, now that we played it, we've figured out that this marker mix was better over time. It's like, oh, that's even better. So we have this fairly simplistic economic engine, and then we want to overlay a role-playing game. It is there. Inside there is a little bit of a role game. You are playing the role of a rifle company commander, and so role-playing games are successful by immersing the player in the world that you're living in. So a lot of the military terminology. So it's a tough one because you got to have the immersion for the effect to work, but with the immersion comes some baggage, right? You got to, what's a platoon? Okay, it's this intermediate level of command. Right? So that is a struggle, and that's where the helping people access that information better has been a win for the team. Is to get those basic concepts of it's meant to be a role-playing game. And so if you kind of keep that in the back of your head, Dungeons and Dragons isn't super prescriptive in every situation. It says, figure it out. These are guidelines. Well, I didn't want to be quite that loosey-goosey, but there is, when you have a rule, say, hey, if you're stuck on something, can't figure it out, just draw a card and randomize it. Because the point of the game isn't the detail that happens. It's the driving the decisions. The events on the map set you up with a situation every turn. So if it's 10 turns, you got 10 situations that you have to solve, and you're not going to have enough time to do it. And there's no school book solution. And so that's the other challenge that some players have, is a lot of games are a puzzle that the pieces eventually fit one or two different ways. Even like Root or whatever. Okay, it's asymmetrical, so each team has a different puzzle. It's not a criticism. It's a cool mechanic. But once you figure out the engine, you try to build that engine, and that's the path to victory. Well, this doesn't present a clean path to victory. It is a bit of a mental challenge for. There is no school. You can do everything like a tactics book, but the enemy gets a vote, and sometimes you get kicked in the teeth. You're like, well, that didn't work out the way we hoped. So now what do you do? And that's the rest of the game, which is, okay, now what do you do? Because that is the constant fear of every commander, is a young soldier, with terror in their eyes, looking at you. Well, sir, what do you want me to do? What do we do? And then, so at some point, if a player feels remorse when they move a chit on a counter to the next card, you have crossed the bridge into creating an emotional response, which is really what we're shooting for.
You've done your job. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. You have learned, and you have. There is a catharsis of such. Not quite like great Greek tragedy here, but you have that effect. And so, if you have that emotional effect, then the game has transpired from just a puzzle to a meaningful puzzle that evokes an emotional response. So that's what I'm shooting for.
One of the things we made, we tried to make clear through through all the extra documentation, the field manuals and stuff, is that you're going to make mistakes while you play it. You're either going to forget you've got these smoke grenades, which you should have used 3 turns ago, or these skills, and that's fine. That's part of it. That's you're a rookie commander. You're going to get better at it as you play, and that's good. And even if you forget a couple of rules as you go along, so long as the overall story is good and it works out, then that's fine. And so we say, don't spend half an hour searching for that one specific rule which you saw a couple of weeks ago when you read the rule book. It's fine. Just go ahead and do what you think is right. Draw a random card if you think that's better. Maybe you'll learn what the actual rule was next time. You get better at it as you continue to play. You don't have to be absolutely perfect the first time you play this, even in either in tactics or just getting all of the rules down. The system's very, very robust, so that everything kind of works out at the end. As long as you get to the cleanup phase and you think, oh well, make these couple of adjustments, then it all works out, which is why the system's really really fun to play when you get into it.
Yeah, I tell myself I was the victim of the fog of war and
right.
stress-induced indecision, and I forgot something.
Oh yeah, and that happens all the time, and it is, and I watch videos of troops in contact, and you find myself like yelling at the camera. I was like, why didn't you pop smoke? Is somebody going to shoot that grenade launcher, or are you just carrying it around for the health? That thing ain't going to shoot itself, son. Use it. It is. And that again, that is a part of the reality check that you get from a game. It's not meant to remember everything. That's just not even possible. It's a great point that it is meant to a learning process. It's also kind of an ancillary thing is it is a role filled by professional officers who oftentimes in different conflicts weren't as professional as we'd hoped, because hey, it's a war, I need an army real quick. you're an officer, you in the back, you're an officer too. And so, hop up here and in the classic 90-day wonder, we'll send you OCS and we're going to send you to be a frontline lieutenant. Well, what's my job? Well, your job is to get these guys to do their job and not get shot. The second part sounds really, really important, though. Should I worry about that? Oh, no, don't worry about it. And so
those guys were 0 for 2.
yeah. And, and I think one thing that, some folks don't necessarily realize is that James Holland in some of his books did a really good job about talking about some of the intensity of the combat in like 1944 and like the Normandy campaign, where units were experiencing casualty rates that exceeded the Somme. People go, oh, the Somme was terrible. You should have been in Normandy. It was even worse. The modern warfare is very dangerous. If you watch what's going on in Ukraine, you're like, holy moly, it's pretty dangerous. Yes, it is very dangerous. And so, I want people to gain appreciation for what it takes to be junior officers in the infantry. It's not a glamorous job. It's not quite like being a captain of a ship, horse show hornblower or anything quite as interesting. But that's how we fight and win our wars. It's at the rifle companies.
So Ben, you talked about how the team has bridged the gap some between that like overarching, more generic rule structure that's kind of like going just for the feel that you want, and bridging the gap to like in the minutia, like what does the player do in this moment? I'm curious about the team because obviously you guys are in very different parts of the world, North America, Europe, and Asia, with time zone differences and everything. How have you managed to collaborate so well in working on this deluxe edition and volume 3?
It's worked quite well, I think. So someone to the UK. Andrew usually disappears of early afternoon, which is obviously bedtime his time, and then reappears just as I'm about to go to bed to a raft of questions or notes that I've sent to him. He's very grumpy when I'm going to bed. and then when I get up, I've got another raft of questions and notes and things back on the document. So again, we're doing kind of synchronous or asynchronous editing on the docs all the time, and so there's always a load of comments and things in there. But it's worked really well, actually. I think chase the sun. We haven't actually met that often, or we've never met physically, but we've only talked online a few times as well.
Yeah. It works out quite well because it means we're working 24 hours on it basically.
Somebody senior is working on it,
taking shifts. Yeah.
And then we got all these online tools now. We got Discord where we can touch base with Jason Carr and other developers, and Messenger and whatever else we have. Email sometimes.
I'm getting old, so email is like how I get most things done, so a lot of my work is drilling into the books. Another book. Actually, my table's covered with books right now because I was doing the research for Taro Saipan, and then the research part is what I really enjoy doing, and then laying out the stuff. I think one of the things that's been really useful with in the deluxe is the more color illustrations. I mean, that's so many people learn by seeing a picture, right? And so, and I've seen that in other rule sets. I think the ability to use more illustrations and rules as the industry has gained capability, and the cost of having well illustrated rule books has become affordable and technologically possible, has really made it that. But the capability to be there also requires talented folks to then put the right pictures in the book, right? So that's the rest of the story. I think they've done a really good job about using Vassal as a way to kind of capture an image, and then that can get translated into the nice slick images for the final product. But that is is a great way to capture I need a picture that looks like this. It's a lot easier to do with the artist to say, I've got this card and this card and this card, and it looks like this. And the artist goes, oh, well, yeah, okay, I can lay that out a lot easier than a verbal description. But illustrations are so important, and they used to be harder to do. Frankly, I think they've gotten easier, and then having people who know how to exploit that capability is super important to making rules just better for not just Fields of Fire, for all games. But I'm kind of happy about Fields of Fire specifically. But yeah, it is super helpful. And the quality of the artwork is just top notch. And because I remember kind of coming out and was like, hey, maybe with this like player guide thing, maybe we do it like a field manual, and then they just like crushed it out of the park. As
yeah, looks great.
Yeah, I was like, well, that really looks exactly like the field manual that's still on my shelf downstairs. Wow. It's like, that was really well done, and so. So you take kind of a seed of an idea, and then people with skills can then really do something even better than I could. That's for sure.
I think that was one of the key things with the sort of getting Deluxe out was it's helping those people, like Andrew says. There's loads of people littered across Board Game Geek who've tried and failed to get it going, or they didn't even know how to set it up, or they did set up a map and then couldn't get going. So again, I think Ben's right. I think the art. In the mission books, even just having the maps of the where to put the cards, and also when we're describing now the attachments you have, and we've put pictures of the counters next to them, so you're not looking for the correct one in your baggies or your trays or whatever you've got. And so even at that level of setting up the very first mission, it's just trying to help people get over the line, because it is a great system. It's a real shame if people give up on it. And again, and then follow that through to the starter mission and the field manuals. It's good.
I definitely agree. Vassal has been a good way to visualize everything. Even before we was working on this, we was in helping out other people on Board Game Geek and Facebook, and just being able to quickly put together a few cards in Vassal, take a screenshot and show it, instead of sort of weird line diagrams and ASCII characters, which people were using before to try and explain things. It's like, this is what it looks like actually, and it's not a blurry photo. It's high res, and that's really good. And that's Colin's Vassal module, which I was using. We had a Vassal module before, which was good, and then
she's over
yeah, for me.
I find it hard to not use Vassal now because it works out all the hits for you. You can just pull the drop down and make the hits, and it fractures off all the lats and things and all the casualties in there. So if I have to use counters, I have to think.
So I do design games with a lot of informational markers, and again, it all stems back to, because I have to get up and go eat something or whatever. Got to know what's going on. So yes, with the Vassal, same with like Musket and Pike, the Vassal for that will take care of all the little fiddly bits for you, and you're like, this is so much easier. Like, well, don't forget how to do it. You might actually pay it on paper, but no. And then to see folks who have done the maps with like little miniatures and stuff. You've seen some pictures of that, and then when they'll have like the trees and stuff, I'm like, oh yeah, you're taking it to another level. I thought I was pretty slick when I had I used little foam board stuff, so when the hills are physically like a little foam board higher, so visually I can see, oh, well, this is the roll of the terrain, and that cost me like $1 to go to the hobby store, just cut out little foam board things, and just have a stack of them. When the hill comes out there, I just put that on there. There's all kinds of cool things you can do with that. But I think but little things like I think Colin, you were saying, having the picture of the counter next to the rule. I mean, that'd be great for any game because Fields of Fire is not unique in having lots of pieces, but it does have 3 campaigns. And that's one of the things that I think is worth mentioning, that is a differentiating factor of the series in the core modules is having 3 campaigns across different eras, because what often happened in the past, and this is in my mind, is you have a cool system, and they roll out for World War II, and we're like, yeah, we want to do Korea, and we want to do Vietnam, or we want to do Afghanistan. And they're like, oh yeah, well, you get to that, and then people will just focus on the World War II because it is popular. Nothing wrong with that. But I think there's some really compelling stories, and again, the immersion piece of, well, what changed? Why is that different? What was the experience different? So maybe that it gets people thinking that it does make for a big box, and so for everybody working on all the stuff, sorry, it's a big box. But I felt fundamentally that would differentiate it in the marketplace from other tactical games, which tend to always kind of be focused on one era, which nothing wrong with that, but I wanted to kind of be different from the pack in that regard. And thanks to Gene and the team way back when in 2007 and 8, when they're like, that's a lot in one box. I'm like, well, if we want to make a splash, this is what I think would be necessary. And when we made a splash, and then I went to Iraq for a year. It's like, it's not the best time for it to hit the market, but it is how it hit. So it got published as literally as I was deploying to Iraq for a year. And so I was like, okay, well, it gives me some interesting research to add to the next one. I think that piece too is now it makes for a lot of work, but I think that is so important to see that kind of the evolution. What is new and what stayed the same. Some things. I was watching a lot of Ukraine combat lately for work, and so a lot is still the same. It's like, oh, turns out trenches still work. Could have seen that one coming. What works? What doesn't work? No, there are some new bits, but some stuff just doesn't change. So.
I have a question that's more geared towards new players to the series, I guess. I would like to know what one thing that you like the best about the series, what's the most fun about the series, what makes you feel something, just something that could entice new players to get into it.
So for me personally, I like it in that it's the realism factor of it. I think, and again, we talked about how people obviously don't have that experience, but to me, it's staying truthful to that. And the other one really is the replayability of them. I think, although they're obviously set missions, as usually 7 to 9 per campaign, I guess. But you can play them, one after the other, the same mission, and it will be a completely different experience. I found. So that's mine. Is replayability.
Nice.
Yeah, definitely the replayability. I know some people, even myself, when I first started playing it in 2017 with 2nd edition, just continually play Normandy Mission 1 over and over again. It'd be different every time, which was nice. And it builds a great story, even if you have no experience. As long as you've seen some war movies or you've read some books, it really does feel like there's a good story being told. And then when you get into it, and you start proceeding through the missions and try a couple of different campaigns, you can see, as Ben said earlier, you can see what changes over time. And so controlling a company in Vietnam, you've got a lot more control over your company because radios have improved. Except you're in a much more difficult situation with it's not a straight line with the enemy in front of you and you at the back. You've got enemies coming from all sides, and it feels very different. And that's what I like about it. And then I realized when I started playing Colin's Falklands campaign, whatever it was, a while ago, it doesn't take too much to get that feeling that you've progressed onto a different era. Radios have changed and the weaponry's slightly changed, and now your approach to the entire battle has changed again, which is nice. You try playing Falklands, like Normandy, and you're going to get shot out in the open and not do well. You're going to get you're going to try leading from the front with your COHQ, and so, no, keep him behind. It's it's just the replayability, and it's how just little tweaks to it can make it feel very, very different each time, and you can tell a story over the campaigns. And we've done that with Colin's done that with Fields of Fire 3. I think you're going from in that one, World War II to the Falklands in the 80s up to 2008 Afghanistan. It's an even bigger range than the original, and you can feel the differences in how everything works, really. But just the whole way of thinking about how you approach a mission is just very different. Tell us about Afghanistan, Colin. How's that different?
So yeah, loads of different. So there's more comms. So again, a lot of people wonder why you can't send somebody. So talking Normandy, instead of Deluxe, why can't you send my troops forward and tell them to find a nice bit of cover? Well, they'll look for some, but they're not under your control because you've sent them the other side of the hedge and you can't see them anymore. You don't know what they're doing. Afghanistan, every man had a small personal radio, so you've got much more control over it. Obviously, you've got things like civilians on the battlefield and unidentified units. There's a mechanism in there where a lot of the contacts involve actually just spotting something you're not sure about, and you get unidentified vehicles and groups appearing and moving around the map. They may be civilians, they may turn out to be Taliban. So there's it's a very different feel from that, in that in Deluxe, obviously, troops see an enemy, they fire at the enemy, and that's the way it goes. A lot of the time in Afghanistan, you'll see something, you won't fire at it because it might be civilians. So you've got to go through a whole sort of identification process. It's simple, but it does change the feel a lot. And again, sorry, we've gone off what's favourite things, but I think we're all very keen. As Ben was saying, we've got quite a lot of things we could do in terms of campaigns. Ben's talked about sort of the few sort of Terror Saipan and Indochina and various other things. And I think we're all very keen not just to put a different badge on the counters and call it a new campaign. We want it to be different. We've certainly done that with Volume 3. I think, Volume 7, if we ever get down there again, we want to still be doing sort of things that are very different, be that different nationalities, different theatres. If we go right back to World War I, it'll obviously be very different. And there's a lot of stuff out there until you run out. We don't just want to reskin it.
Yeah, and I agree 100%. So in part of the thought process is once you get enough base games out there, you've got a lot of stuff that can be done at kind of low threshold. One booklet gives you a whole nother campaign because you've already got the pieces from 2 different sets. That was, so like if you're into Korea, I was really into Korea. So I've got Chinese in one box, and I've got Army in one box. Now I can do Army versus Chinese, which isn't in the box, but one booklet could do that because you have all the pieces you need. So so there it is. That kind of flexibility is nice, I think. But to the original question, what do I like about it best? Is the narrative it generates, not just in the mission itself, but mission to mission. And that's the story. If you read, Company Commander or the Clay Pigeons of Salo, that reads this campaign narrative is much like just about any memoir of a war experience, and so you kind of feel that as you play out the games. That's what I enjoy about playing it, and so that's why I try to put so much into the research so we can pull in the enough immersive history to where somebody can kind of feel that narrative as well.
So something you guys didn't really talk about, and I agree with all the things that you like. I like those things about Fields of Fire too. But and I mean, everybody who knows me knows that I love immersive storytelling games. But actually, there's something I love better about Fields of Fire. I just feel like it presents tactical problems that are different every time you play. They're really challenging. I mean, I've never seen a game like this, because you think about all the tactical games we sit down and play, they do not present tactical challenges in the way that Fields of Fire does. So especially for the ones where the terrain's all different and you don't know what you're facing as an enemy, and it unfolds as you go. You don't get a God's eye view of everything. And so I find the tactical challenge of it to be really intense. You never have enough to, it's what Ben was talking about earlier. It's scarce resources. You need 3 times what you have, but you still have to go accomplish the mission. And so I feel like it's really challenging, and it's really kind of harrowing sometimes. You lose in this game. You definitely lose. But when you win, it's really super satisfying. So I just think the tactical challenge that it presents is awesome. But it says on here I'm a super fan, so I would probably say that.
And to your point, so there's a thing that we do in training, leaders, and we call them tactical decision games, or TDGs, or the new, I guess the new popular term is decision forcing games, or DFGs. And so it's literally the government will pay a consultant, generally a veteran, who will come into a unit and present them a set of tactical decision games or decision forcing games to help teach critical thinking skills of NCOs and junior officers. And I was like, yeah, so I presented the game at the last Military Operations Research Society Symposium, which is a mouthful. But part of military operations research generates war games for the Department of Defense. Right? And so a lot of those are very strategic or very top secret stuff. But I was like, if you want tactical decision games, well, you can pay a consultant. I don't want to put them out of business, but here, this is commercial off the shelf. You can play and generate in number of decision games. And I do know, just from emails and feedback, that there are lots of folks out there who are junior officers and NCOs who do play Fields of Fire, who do enjoy that aspect. I was like, well, it's there. Hey, government, if you want to buy a copy, then there's nothing to stop you. It's
still on P500.
Yeah, yes. You get it cheaper if you pre-order, or you pay full price. That's okay. Compared to what it costs to pay a custom person to come into your place, is going to cost a lot more than dropping $80 for a endless set of decision games. That do present force structures in the way that they're actually structured and how they actually work. And so I think that is something that's really cool. I'd like to say, hey, I'm happy to help out my young men and women following after me that have to learn these 100%. Skills.
100%. So I have another question as a designer, okay? Because I'm a little bit jealous, I have to admit. I tried to steal this for Mr. President, and I never could figure out how to make it work. So one of the things I love about Fields of Fire is you're not having to roll dice all the time, because that kind of takes you out of the immersion a little bit. And so you've got this action card deck, and it does flipping everything. Okay, I mean, anything you can do, it's on those action cards. Where did you come up with that? That is so cool.
So that's a great question. So I was inspired by a couple of things. Obviously, upfront used cards for some of that, but they mixed the metaphor a little bit. So I tried to separate, because certain aspects of the terrain are not random, right? It's like, once I see the hill, I know there's a hill there. I may not know what's on the other side of it, but how that generated terrain in the game was a little wonky. So I was like, I kind of like some of the concepts there, but let me split the baby. So I have an action deck and then I have terrain. So that was that first inspiration. And then the other one, frankly, was Down in Flames, where the speed at which you could play cards rapidly to get a result was, and I liked the iconography. I'm looking for 3 bullseyes. Flip, flip, flip. Oh, okay. And so the speed at which you could do that was attractive. And so I was like, oh, okay, if I can mix this and stir it up in a pot, we can actually, and then building the mathematical model. So what I did was a Gaussian distribution, and then laid it out against 50 cards, and then I laid them out in distributions in opposite directions. So as you play the card, different things they're not all distributed in the same way. The different distributions are kind of flip-flopped. So some cards have some good things and bad things, and some have some good things and bad things in the other realm. So that as you churn the deck, you get more randomness.
It's really smart, Ben. And just kudos to you. It's really, really smart. I have a question, kind of a follow-on to that for all of you, but especially Colin and Andrew. Are we going to see any new kind of results on the action cards in future games?
So we're going to redesign them for Volume 3 slightly, but only aesthetically, I think, at the moment. I don't think we've added any sort of major changes to it because they work, basically. But yeah, so we're looking at doing... so some of the we don't want an American star on the British decks and things like that. So so there'll be a few aesthetic changes, but that's sort of early days for that. But yeah, I've not thought about it whether we did come up with something for future ones, but not in Volume 3 anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I have thought about it. It's good to think about these things. What could something change? Could it be better? But it just works. The action deck at the moment, we haven't come up with anything which would really need changing it at all, except the helmets and the stars.
Put a load of U's back into all the words.
Yeah, and then we got a whole thing where you put the U's back in, right? Do we have a color sergeant? Is the color sergeant actually a counter, or is it just a CSM?
No, it's just CSM. No color sergeant.
Yeah. So when I went to officer candidate school, there was a billet for a color sergeant from the Royal Marines with us. So so you had this, and he was in the physical training program. So you're running down this wooded trail at Quantico, and then you hear this like yelling, screaming English accent, and you're like, please, Lord, don't let him catch me. So his big trick was, he go to the rope climbing, and you climb 2 adjacent ropes, and then climb the ropes like that. It's like, that's pretty fit.
That's special things.
Yeah, that was not a basic requirement for all of us. We just had to climb the rope after doing the obstacle course repeatedly. You still have to climb the rope, but he'd gotten quite good at it. So so that was my color sergeant experience. And but yeah, the whole CSM is very English take on it. So in the U.S. military, the sergeant major is at the battalion. So we have a tradition in the U.S. military of a first sergeant, and so but in the British military, and correct me if I get this wrong. I will be in the UK working with the MOD here in a few weeks, but we're probably not going to be at that level. But it's a warrant officer who's in the billet of company sergeant major.
Yeah, warrant officer second class, company sergeant major in brackets, and then you have a warrant officer first class, regimental sergeant major is the senior man. But just going back to the colour sergeant, we don't know. So the colour sergeant comes back from when battalions fought in big straight lines in red jackets, and you had the colours, the flag, and the colour sergeants would basically protect the flag. You'd have a young officer carrying it because he'd always get shot at, and then you'd have the colour sergeants who could probably climb 2 ropes at the same time to look after him and to pick the flag up and give it to another young officer when he got killed. So that's where colour sergeant comes from.
Yeah, and that's why they called him an ensign, because he carried the ensign. So it turns out it was a ground rank, but as well as a naval rank. But yeah, and so and then in the American tradition, a company had 2 lieutenants, and so he would be the oldest one would be the first one, and then you'd have the second one. So you'd have a first and second lieutenant, and they formalized that later on. But yeah, a lot of these structures were common, and they're similar but slightly different. the use of warrant officers. That's a popular. The Canadians do that. It's I guess Commonwealth does that. The Germans used to do that. So the Feldwebel was treated differently. Right, it was treated like a warrant officer rank with their senior NCOs.
We won't get into lance sergeants, which are the same as a corporal, and corporals of horse who aren't. And
right. Yeah. So yeah,
the joys of a fractured military.
You can't have a. There's no. Well, it used to be. There was no sergeants at certain levels in the cavalry because they were always riding the ranks. So that's the distinction at some level. Is a corporal is in the ranks, a sergeant is outside of the ranks. That goes back to 1600s when they were doing that. And then every officer had a sergeant that was corresponded to them, which actually goes back to sergeant is just a word for servant to the officer. Although we don't treat it that way now, so some great drill, and I did a lot of that in the musket and pike stuff where, and then there is a thread that, I found musket and pike very interesting because it's the birth of modern military and organization. And Fields of Fire is looking at, well, this is the evolution of infantry from World War II to now. Although technically speaking, we'd start at 1917 to now is how we organize and fight.
We've got to wrap up pretty soon, but we do have a couple questions that we like to ask all of our guests on GMT Talk. So the first of which, do you have a favorite game by another GMT designer? And any of you can answer if you want.
I like the Great Battles of History series by Mark Herman Richberg. That was what I was playing before I bought Fields of Fire, I think. So yeah, I got Great Battles of Alexander, the SPQR, the new Julius Caesar set. They're just great. I play most of my games and by myself because I have no friends. But and I think Great Battles of History is a good works very well as a two-handed game. Fields of Fire even better, but so that's what I like.
I do most solitaire as well, or solo. So I like Joey White stuff, Skies Above Britain. I like Atlantic Chase. I'm quite looking forward to Mike Berticelli's Wolfpack. I did a bit of play testing on that. It's really nice. I'm quite excited about that one.
Cool.
Okay, so for me, I played. I think I have all the GBOH stuff. So and obviously that a lot of that was influential in the musket and pike design. But yeah, no, that's probably what I played the most from GMT. Although I do have to admit, I've crushed Ivanhoe because the family loves Ivanhoe.
Me too.
Family game.
It's like we wore out a set and had to buy new ones because and then the family each has their own kit so they can play it when we're not together. So it's been some edgy
cutthroat
family confirmation. Wait, no, I got the last card. Yeah, so that is one that we played a lot with the family. And then my son and I played a fair amount of Battle Line. And so he likes Battle Line and Maneuver. So those are fun ones that he's played.
Small boxes, but there's a lot in those games.
And then my son and I played a ton of Down in Flames.
Oh yes,
all that
great
stuff.
game.
Love Down in Flames.
And that was part of the card play was part of my inspiration on Fields of Fire, as I'd mentioned before. So that's where we did it. And my son and I enjoyed playing that for years, and we actually did tournaments and stuff at various venues.
Cool. So. Yeah, that's a lot of fun. Okay, so our last question then is who's one or two people who've had a positive influence on you as a designer or as a developer?
Yeah.
I'm a rookie at this, but Ben, obviously, for putting a great system together. Let me build on it with Volume 3, and shout out to Jason Carr as well for he's been very patient with us with our stupid questions and naive. Can this be out by Christmas? That was about 3 years ago.
It has been very inspiring working with has been very inspiring working with Jason and getting onto his GMT1 Discord and just seeing all of the games coming together. And yeah, it's got a very open, collaborative way of working, so we can, as jump into Wolfpack as Colin was doing, and other games, and trying out new things. There's a new coin in Japan, which is really good. Played that. That was Onin War. Yeah. That's probably my favorite coin, which I played so far, and it's years away now. Yeah.
Well, if there's a game that has where I live on the map, you have to buy it.
Yeah, that's right.
There you go.
So like Army of the Potomac, in Rebel Fury, well, yeah, I live there, so I have to buy those, right? And so what do you do?
Yeah.
So,
Well, thanks, guys. That's really all the time we have today for GMT Talk, but thank you so much for coming to talk to us and being the guests and telling us all about Fields of Fire.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
You're very welcome.
Thanks for having us.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having us.
All right. We will see everyone next time on GMT Talk.